So that's great. Welcome to our council session today. I'm going to ask members of council if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interests under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Okay, seeing none, I have a motion that the Council of the Township of Sandra and Wellington confirm its agenda for its meeting held September 9, 2019. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And we have an agenda. So the purpose of today's session is singular. It's just to look at our draft animal control bylaw. And so the way that we're going to do things is this. So we have our Supervisor of Customer Service and Deputy Clerk, Lisa Miller, is going to go through a presentation. Then we have a number of delegations. We have 12 delegations to speak. Come up and to the podium, state your name, and you have 5 minutes to speak. Just make sure you hit the button on your microphone there, because we are live streaming tonight. So we want to make sure that we get this on our live streaming stream as well. 5 minutes to speak. I'll allow for questions after everybody's done. So the Deputy Clerk is going to do a presentation. You'll do your delegations. Then we'll move into council discussion, and council will have whatever questions that they have as a group, and we'll discuss it as a group. At that point, it seems kind of formal, but at that point, it's a council discussion. It's not a discussion with you guys and back to the council. We'll discuss what came out in the session. Because there's a lot, as you see through the bylaw, there's a lot of different components to it. And the purpose that we're moving ahead with some sort of bylaw is because the other one was out of date and we have to have a bylaw that's more comprehensive. So we're moving in that direction. But again, I want to reiterate, this is a draft bylaw, and the reason that you're here is to give us your input. And I think we're probably going to get that tonight. So without further ado, I think that lays things out. Without further ado, I'll ask our Deputy Clerk, Lisa Miller, to go through the presentation.
So the draft animal control bylaw was first released for public comment at the Spring Key Projects open house. Following that, we advertised on the township website, Connect CW, the Wellington Advertiser, the Grand Radio Station, and via social media asking for public comment. The first draft was prepared by staff with a consultant for comment, keeping in mind direction we've received from council over the years, current trends, and requests and complaints from residents that we've heard over the years. So the current animal control bylaw is actually the current dog control bylaw and only deals with the registration of licensing of dogs and kennels. As well as it provides a process for the designation of dangerous dogs. Two of the former municipalities that now make up Centre Wellington had exotic pet bylaws, those being the Village of Elora and the Township of Nicole. So the new bylaw wants to attempt to make the rules standard across the township instead of the former municipal boundaries. So looking at what's changed in this bylaw, we have updated and expanded the list of definitions. It considers the registration and licensing of cats, including the possibility of mandatory microchipping, the incorporation of exotic pet provisions township-wide, a limit on the number of small animals permitted per dwelling, and provisions for permitting backyard chickens. More looking at the coop, that's one change that we will be making in the wording is in terms of registration of hens, it would be registration of the coop. It also shows that kennel licensing has been made more restrictive, and the dangerous dog designation has actually been removed from this version of the bylaw to be handled under the Dog Owners Liability Act. Dogs would also now have to be on a leash when off the owner's property, except for when they're in a leash-free dog park. So we've had lots of public interest in this draft bylaw, and staff have reviewed all the feedback. Feedback was received in various formats from residents, and a few common themes emerged as outlined in page 2 of the report. Staff have reviewed all the feedback, and wish to include the changes as listed on the slide. As I mentioned, the register of coops, limiting the number of hens per coop, not the registration per hen. Adjusting the wording for rabies vaccines so that it's as required as suggested by veterinarians. Minor wording and some suggestions from the Guelph Humane Society, our current animal control providers. Increasing the impoundment of an animal that was picked up running at large from 3 to 5 days. Include provisions for animals left in confined spaces, so that is when an animal is left in a hot car. And excluding llamas and alpacas from the prohibited animal list. I also wanted to mention that there was a lot of comments regarding section 2.2 of the draft bylaw that no person shall permit a dog to make noise, barking, howling, or whining. To read this section, you have to read the bylaw as a whole. When you read it as a whole, you see the definition of noise is accepted by the courts is a noise at the point of reception that is likely to disturb the inhabitants. And that wording means that if a dog is to bark once, which they all naturally do, or, you let them out, they bark at somebody walking by and then it stops. That's not what would be enforced. It's the persistent barking or the dog that's always barking. And if council so wished, we could implement a policy for enforcing noise complaints. That's not included in the bylaw, but would work with it. This policy could include examples of submission of noise by logs or the number of residents that would need to complain about that dog. The other point I just wanted to mention is we would like to include the noise provision in the noise bylaw, which is one of our bylaws that's under review, but it's a little ways out. So for now, the noise from animals or from barking dogs is included in this bylaw. So following this meeting, we're looking for some direction from council, and then we will put together short form wording and fines for offenses in the bylaw that would be forwarded to the Ministry of the Attorney General for review and approval. The final draft will then be presented to council for adoption and implementation by staff. I'll come back to this slide after we hear from delegates, because tonight we would like to hear from the community before we proceed with direction. And so we'll come back to this, but the last slide is just some of the direction we were looking at of the common themes that we heard from the people. And I'm happy to answer questions, as the mayor indicated, after we hear from the public.
Great, thank you very much, Lisa, and that gives us a little bit of context, and now we'll move into delegations. So the first delegation that I have is Nicole Simoens from CW Backyard Poultry.
Okay,
Welcome, Nicole.
it's always exciting to be first. Okay, do I have to press this button? Okay. So I'm here on behalf of CW Backyard Poultry. The 2 points that I would like to just reject from the bylaw would be, one is cleaning out the chicken coop daily. This I feel is unnecessary. It will cause a lot of waste that has to go to the dump and be disposed of. Chickens generally don't smell that much after a day. It's also a health concern for chickens in that every time you put sawdust down, you get dust that comes up that they're going to be breathing in. It's not really a very practical, healthy, or feasible way to go about it. I don't mind if the bylaw would say something like it cannot emit an offensive odor. That's fair. I mean, that would basically be based on if you had a complaint that said, oh, the coop next door stinks, well, okay. The other thing that I am here on behalf of is the age restriction for chickens, to say that it has to be 4 months old. I can assume that the reason for this is because you're concerned that there is roosters. Roosters, we agree. We don't necessarily need roosters in town. They're territorial, et cetera, et cetera. Most people, when they get chickens, they buy them as chicks. They're already sexed. As of right now, for populations in Fergus for chickens, most people get rid of their roosters. They adopt them out or find a new home for them. So from my survey, looking at the different coops in Fergus and Elora, there isn't a lot of roosters as it stands right now. But with the age restriction on the chicks, like a lot of people, when they get chickens, they want to have the chicks so that their children can learn about the life cycles. That's kind of precious to them. So a kid can actually see from the day that it hatches and it's a fresh bird and stuff. It's a form of learning respect for animals. Something like that just doesn't make sense to take away. So those are the only 2 points that I am covering on this, but I don't know what the happy medium would be, or if there would be a proper way to address the rooster issue. Saying no roosters to me seems fair, but to put an age restriction on chickens seems kind of redundant. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Nicole. Appreciate that. Next, we have Lance Henderson.
I also had a PowerPoint presentation. Is there?
Just give us a minute.
Okay.
Welcome, Lance.
Thank you. Is there a remote or anything to control that, or? And my apologies, I'll be skipping over slides because I was told I would have 10 minutes, so. Is it ready to go? Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm a University of Guelph graduate. I'm also a certified risk manager. I have over 30 years working with exotic animals. I've looked after them at 2 universities and the federal government. For the last 6 years, I've been going around to Southern Ontario municipalities, helping them with their exotic pet bylaws. Now, a show of hands, who here wants to ban bees? Who wants to ban having 4 goldfish in your house? Who thinks it's okay that we have rhinoceroses in our subdivisions? Who wants to ban your family from coming out of town and having their dogs here? All of this is true with the exact wordings that are on this bylaw. There's contradictions in it, and the prohibited animals section especially has a lot of errors. There's non-scientific names. There's names that are outdated from 1977. They have wrong combinations of animals. It's like saying, we're going to ban trucks here, including motorcycles. The author here did not know what a horse was. Sadly, I've gone from municipality to municipality, and I see this all the time. Now, this all falls within contra preferentiam. As the city lawyer, this is a big deal. I mean, judgment goes against the draftsman of the contract. So if you went before a judge, there are big sections that would be tossed out because there's errors in spelling, complete errors, and contradictions. Now, I do have a petition of 242 signatures. This is all from Center Wellington, all written down, not internet. It's asking to remove the 3 limit on small animals and to revise the prohibited animal section to my list of prohibited animals. What this does, prohibited animals that are actually dangerous, you can actually enforce, like rhinoceroses would not be allowed. A few small animals that are not dangerous will be allowed back in. I'm not asking for any charge. I will sit down with your lawyers, your current consultant, and help you redraft this, because right now, there's just too many errors with it. Now, bear with me here. I hear it all the time, we shouldn't have exotics here. Well, it's a problem because all of our pets and all our livestock, they don't belong here either. They're all imported to North America. So that's not really an excuse. And exotics, these are rodents, they're birds, and all our fish. They're found exactly the same form in the wild. A domesticated animal is something that is different from the form found in nature and would no longer survive in nature on its own. That would legally be a domesticated animal. People far too much assume if it says exotic, it's automatically dangerous. It only has to be domesticated to be safe. Now, we don't need exotic animals, right? We don't need little dogs either, ponies. Who needs a swan, let alone more than 3 of them? You know, it's a situation. People say snake. This is the biggest one that I've got feedback on my bylaw here. Everyone's terrified of the snakes, the ball python that was let go. There's 3,000 species of snakes. There's only 300 breeds of dog. You're all thinking of giant snakes when I say the word snake. I know this. Right now, Betty White, that was your 92nd birthday present, and it would be banned under the current wordings. Are we willing to say that we're more terrified of snakes than she is, that little old lady? She's handling snakes. She's going to outlive all of us. You do realize that. Snakes, everyone thinks that they can swallow people whole. Their stomach is 1/3 of their body. So the next time you hear on the internet or from a friend of a friend of a friend that a vet's telling you the snake's starving itself because it wants to eat its owner, they're lying. A 9-foot snake has a 3-foot stomach. They're eating groundhogs and rabbits, not people. So the snakes I'm asking you to ban are the ones that you think of when you hear the word snake. There's only 20 species and subspecies out of the 3,000 that get big enough to eat people. I'm asking you to look at the difference here. There's a huge difference. It's not just a concession, this is factual. One can hurt people, one will not. Another problem with reptiles, we don't take them out for walks. They're not running around their backyards like chickens, dogs, or cats. So if you have 4 ball pythons, how is that impacting your neighbor? I live on a farm. I'm allowed to have 1,000 chickens, old bylaws and new ones. But if I have 5 bearded dragons, I can get a $10,000 fine. That seems rather ridiculous for a farm property. Your current livestock, thank you for putting in the alpacas and llamas, but it still bans a lot of animals. There are lots of cattle people that have a couple emus on the side. You're raising roosters and chickens for meat. Well, you also raise a couple meat rabbits. You're not allowed to do this. You're taking that away from our farmers. And if we have another mad cow or avian flu scare, people are going to stop buying. And farmers, if they put all their eggs in one basket, they're in trouble. Non-traditional animals that you're trying to ban fit the definition of livestock. Many of them, hundreds to thousands of years, they've been bred by people and domesticated. The Toronto Zoo, just so you're aware, they've taken unprecedented protection of the public by allowing camel rides. They let people feed the alpacas and entire families. They can walk through the kangaroo enclosure. So why were these banned in the first place? Unfortunately, it's fear of the unknown. We know about cats and dogs, so we know that, okay, we'll ban a tiger but not a cat. We know Ontario, we banned pit bulls, but we didn't confuse that with the golden retrievers. But the second people start talking about exotics, they freak out, they're scared, and they just blanket ban everything. Our venom wordings, right now, it says all insects would be banned that have venom. Currently in Ontario, you get a permit for a hive inspection. That's not the same as your wording saying you need explicit permission for a banned animal. So we've banned bees. Now, my wording, only ban animals that have medically significant venom. It's not a gray area. You either need to go to the hospital or you don't. I'm sure many of you were bit by a garter snake or had friends when you were kids. Garter snakes are venomous, but they don't affect humans. Technically, that's banned. I'm sure you all watched Fear Factor. How do you get stung 12 times by a scorpion and then jump off an exploding bus? How do you get bit on the tongue by a tarantula and then dive underwater to save your friend from a submerged car? These are all harmless pets, but they'd be banned under the current wordings. A definition of phobia is an irrational fear of something. We elected all of you to make rational decisions on behalf of the city. Please let me help you do that. Let's fix some of this wordings.
Great, thank you, Lance. Appreciate that. Very informative. Next, we have Sandra Brown. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have a copy of the proposed bylaw, and I did send a document in referring to it. Item 2.2 on the proposed bylaw, application in general, that's the heading. 2.2, how will the noise caused by dogs barking, howling, or whining be assessed, e.g. decibels, length of time barking occurs, or time of day barking occurs? As the owner of 2 companion animals, dogs, guidelines are requested and welcomed. The noise definition is too vague. The noise definition reads, "Noise means a sound that at the point of reception is likely to disturb the inhabitants." Refer instead to bylaw 2005, items 1:14 and 9.2. The item 1:114, noise shall mean the sound made by any dog which unreasonably disturbs the peace, quiet, and comfort or repose of any person in any dwelling unit for a period longer than 1 hour. It's more enforceable than the one that is in the current bylaw draft. Also, noise unending experienced in South Aurora has nothing to do with dogs barking, howling, or whining. I don't like being woken up at 6:30 in the morning by my neighbor blowing snow, but that happens. Much more noise than any dog would make. Dogs, the application for license, I believe you did address that about the anti-rabies vaccine. The impoundment, it says the pound keeper shall make every effort, not just a reasonable effort. Owners value their companion animals as family members. Also, it refers to Animals for Research Act, implying that if you don't pick your animal up from the Guelph Humane Society, it's going to go to animal research. Well, that's not what the Animals for Research Act reads. It says, when animals found running at large are impounded, the Animal for Research Act requires the pound to take all reasonable steps to return the animals to their owners. There is no obligation for any municipal pound to release an animal to a registered research facility. And yet it implies that in the bylaw. As far as I'm concerned, my dogs are part of my family. Any threat against them, I consider a threat against myself. So I'm quite concerned about what's going on with this bylaw. I did move in with 3, knowing I wasn't allowed 3. I had 3 neutered male dogs. Apparently that constitutes a kennel, or did. That's some kennel, 3 neutered males. Well, 2 of them had died. So now Laura can heave a sigh of relief because I only have 1 dog. Okay, anybody have any questions? No? Oh, the part about the kennel, terms, conditions, and standard. I think that's also been mentioned. It looks as though, from my reading of it, you're trying to eliminate puppy mills, and anything that can be done to eliminate puppy mills, I'm all in favor of. Dogs should not be in cages with wire floors. There's some other things there too, but it will take time to go back and forth to the bylaw. You know what it is, you have copies of it. Chickens and pigeons, when properly housed and managed, I don't care how many people have, they can have as many as they want. And when we lived on the farm, we had 3 show bitches having a litter once every 3 years and 1 stud dog. Even with a kennel license, every dog lived and whelped in the house. They lived in my house. I didn't live in their kennel. None bothered anyone. Now all this. Puppy mills need ending, and this is the way to proceed. Living people like myself at the time would have been in violation of a local bylaw. Okay, I hope I've made sense, more or less.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So Shelley Mahovlich and Devon Black, tag team. Welcome, Shelley and Devon.
Mayor Linton and councillors. We are going to talk about Schedule A, the diurnal and nocturnal raptors in the proposed animal bylaw, the restriction of them. We request that this be removed or amended if a person holds a falconer license. A falconer is a person who keeps, trains, or follows the sport of hawking and requires the use of raptors. This is a regulated activity in Ontario and is governed by the Ontario government under the Fish and Wildlife Conservation, the Ministry of Natural Resources. To become a falconer, one has to apprentice under a falconer who has been licensed at least 5 years and apply to the ministry for an apprentice license. It is a 15-month term and must be signed off by the sponsor and then apply for a general license through the ministry. A raptor must have a numbered identification band, which acts as a microchip and is never to be removed from the bird. The ministry requires an accurate logbook that records information for each falconry event and must include each bird identified by their band number. This book is reviewed annually by the ministry. A falconer must also hold a valid outdoor card and a valid small game license. We also request that a falconer be able to house the raptors, on their property, free fly the raptors on their property, or with permission from other landowners, and be able to walk in town and public places with the bird tethered to the falconer. We feel under these conditions, raptors should be allowed, as falconry is a legal and highly strict activity in which laws laid out by the provincial government and the Ministry of Natural Resources are to be followed carefully. These governing bodies ensure the birds, public and falconers, are safe and protected and can revoke the falconer's license for any misdoings or violations. We feel that having raptors owned by a licensed falconer located within our communities is practical and viable. And we thank you for your reconsideration in this matter.
Thank you. Oh,
Sorry. I am a licensed falconer. I have been for a year, and I've been practicing for 3 years. I understand that a lot of people think that any bird of prey is dangerous because it is a bird of prey. No matter how much I work with it, it's still wild. I work with nature. It's not my pet. But my hawk I have been working with for a year, and I've worked with plenty of falcons. I've worked with hawks, owls, eagles, and none of them have ever hurt me. They are great animals, and I understand that there is a concern for safety, but these are trained. I understand if there was to be in the bylaw something against hunting with these birds, because you are legally allowed to hunt with these birds, but you have to follow protocols of hunting, obviously, so you wouldn't be able to do that in town anyways. So I would understand if you put wordings in like that. But I do feel that I would like to come down with my birds and be able to house them in my mom's backyard, because otherwise I will not be able to come down, because these birds are 24/7 maintenance and care. I cannot leave them. There are not many falconers that you would be able to have a babysitter like you would your kids. So please reconsider it. Thank you.
thank you very much, Devon and Shelley. Appreciate that. Kelsye Coulter. Welcome, Kelsye.
Thank you. My name is Kelsye Coulter, and I'm presenting on behalf of my neighborhood, about 6 or 7 people in the audience. We form a neighborhood on the first line of West Garifraxa, and we appreciate this opportunity to address council. The reason we're here is this. We have an audio here that we'd like people to listen to. So this is the dog barking that we hear in our neighborhood regularly. This audio was taken from my garage, inside my garage, which is about 400 meters from a facility that's in our neighborhood. And that's what I wanted you to hear. I guess that's good enough, thanks. As a neighborhood delegation, we're here this evening to suggest a clause be included in the draft bylaw that clarifies the responsibility we believe the Township of Centre Wellington has for enforcing their dog barking bylaw. We're interested in the bylaw because for over 15 years now, we've been forced to listen to barking and yapping dogs in our neighborhood, and no government agency will take responsibility for the situation. Ontario Nutrilabs is an industrial kennel that performs dog food testing. Their test subjects are over 400 beagles and small yappy dogs. These dogs take turns being kennelled outside during business hours, 7 days a week, 8 hours a day. They bark and howl and drive us into our homes. Regularly, the dogs are heard inside our homes. Depending on the wind direction, the noise level can be negligible to infuriatingly loud. All of us here tonight are experiencing a huge loss in the enjoyments of our properties and fear for the future realty values of same. Some of us have communicated our concerns to the current and past owners of ONL. Over 12 years ago, we had a community meeting with ONL and were told something would be done about noise abatement. We're still waiting. Here's a bit of a history as we understand it. Dr. Don McEwen started Ontario Nutrilabs, and the business was housed in Fergus on St. David Street. A year before amalgamation, the business was moved to a 100-acre agricultural parcel on the first line of West Garifraxa. At the time, no neighbors were notified or asked about the move. We soon realized that our neighborhood now included hundreds of dogs, and the outdoor runs meant that we heard them frequently. The McEwens were well aware of the neighbors' concerns, and they assured us that they were going to do something about it. But about 13 years ago, the business changed hands, and the new owners expanded more than once, building new outside runs and providing outdoor time for the dogs 7 days a week. We're not concerned that the dogs are out for 8 hours daily. An investment by Ontario Nutrilabs to abate the noise coming from their facility is what we're requesting. Only then will our neighborhood again experience the peaceful enjoyment of our properties, as is our right. I won't go into details about all the different levels of government that we've tried to get help from. We've expressed our concerns over 13 years, and suffice it to say that no levels of government have listened to us. So getting nowhere with government agencies, Paul Hennekens and I felt that we had no choice but to file a small claims nuisance suit against ONL. In 2018, a judge ruled in our favor, agreeing that Ontario Nutrilabs barking dogs constituted a nuisance in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, a small claims ruling does not compel ONL to make the required changes on their property to abate the noise. This summer, our neighborhood was getting legal advice about the possibility to file a nuisance suit in Superior Court when we saw that the animal control bylaw was up for renewal. On advice from our lawyer, we would like to propose a minor adjustment to the draft law. And I just wanted to hand these out. If you could just pass them along, please. In section 2.2 of the bylaw, we suggest that you add the phrase, including facilities listed in section 2.4B, so that it reads, 2.2, no person, including facilities listed in section 2.4B, shall permit a dog to make a noise by barking, howling, or whining. To end this presentation, may I quote a few sentences of a 2012 letter written from the Minister of the Environment to the Township of Centre Wellington about this issue. The Ministry understands that the facility is under the jurisdiction of the Animals for Research Act. There is no authority under this Act for the Ontario Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs to regulate noise coming from this facility. Since OMAFRA has no authority to regulate noise and there are no requirements within the Animals for Research Act to have the dogs placed outside during the day, the Act cannot serve as a basis for an exemption to local bylaws. Legal counsel for the Township of Centre Wellington has failed to show why Section 9.2 of Municipal Bylaw 2005-007 is not applicable. Section 9.2 simply states, no owner of a dog shall permit the dog to make any persistent barking, calling, or whining noise likely to disturb the residents of adjacent properties. The Ministry of the Environment's position is that the Animals for Research Act does not exempt the facility from having to abide by Section 9.2 of Bylaw 2005-007, nor does it exempt the Township of Centre Wellington from enforcing it. Noise from barking dogs is a municipal bylaw issue and does not fall under the jurisdiction of OMAFRA. We ask that you work with the facility to enforce your bylaw. Summing up, if you choose to follow this recommendation, I would ask that you write the bylaw in such a way that it is enforceable, and we hope that the municipality has the will to enforce it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Kelsye. Next, we have Dr. Ray Worden.
Good evening. I come to address section 4.3B with regards to rabies vaccination. There is an ongoing evolution in rabies vaccine technology and the guidelines as pertain to those vaccines. The federal government regulates the rabies vaccines and the directions for their use. The provincial government then dictates under the Public Health Act and various rabies regulations how we're supposed to use those vaccines. As this currently states, vaccinations that may not be needed are demanded by this bylaw, and I appear to help answer any questions as pertain to that. My suggestion is that upon demand, the owner of an animal must present a current rabies vaccination. The interval of rabies vaccination should be determined by the veterinarian and the animal's owner.
Okay, thank you very much. Brandon and Colleen Dobbie. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to first thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight, as the topic is very close to me. It has affected both myself and my family very deeply over the past few years. I can say with great certainty that I understand the difficulty in crafting such a bylaw to be fair and effective is extremely difficult. It's not easy, and I applaud Council for its efforts in attempting to do so. While the new draft bylaw provides what seems to be a better defined set of rules and regulations around various items, including that of kennels, it is still extremely lax on setting out a concrete means for dealing with the larger issue here we have in Centre Wellington. What I'm alluding to is barking. In the new draft bylaw, there are approximately 9 pages dedicated just to kennels alone, setting out a definitive concrete specification of regulations pertaining to the operation of a kennel. Conversely, general barking or other noises is relegated to a single line, section 2, paragraph 2. No person shall permit a dog to make a noise by barking, howling, or whining. Whereas the previous dog control bylaw specified in section 1, paragraph 14, noise shall mean the sound made by a dog which unreasonably disturbs the peace, quiet, comfort, or repose of any person in any dwelling for any period for longer than an hour. In previous discussions with staff members of the township, enforcement officers, the previous bylaw was actually deemed unenforceable, and that the new animal control bylaw will be. This raises several concerns that I wish to have addressed by council, preferably, this evening. Firstly, with the fact that the general barking or other noises emitted from a dog is prescribed by the draft bylaw as being prohibited, how do you see this as enforceable? In comparison to the previous bylaw, for example, where the duration of said barking was defined clearly, the new draft one does not do so. This seems to me like it would be an open to extreme variation of interpretation, something that the previous bylaw was deemed to be unenforceable for. This is from consultation with previous staff during such events as the open house in the spring. This leads to my second question, which is if this new draft bylaw doesn't clearly define barking, and such as its duration, intensity, etc., does this mean that the township is taking a hard stance on zero tolerance? This personally seems impossible because as it stands, there is only one bylaw enforcement officer, which operates only during the hours of regular business. Sometimes it takes him days or even weeks to investigate issues. From my personal experience, our bylaw enforcement as it stands is highly fractured and consistently finding ways to pass the buck. Over the course of the many years my family and I have had to deal with unruly neighbors with violent and extremely vocal dogs, responsibility for enforcement has bounced from individuals such as the Joel Allen, to the OSPCA, to the OPP, and to your enforcement officer. And once again, the cycle returns to the beginning every time and repeats itself. What I feel is we have currently is the inability by the township to assume responsibility for its bylaws and enforce them. In addition, there have been multiple occasions where the OPP have been involved with dog barking in our neighborhood. And quite frankly, unless the township wishes to open the discussion of issues that stem from losing our own police force from amalgamation, which as I realize is beyond the scope of this meeting, the township needs to come to realize that it is important that one man alone cannot do this job. Enforcement is a 24-hour, 7 days a week job. It is required by this bylaw, and it is a team effort. Not one single person responsible during business hours. But without this enforcement of 24/7, to coin a phrase, this bylaw has all bark and no bite. And finally, I would like council to understand the psychological effects that this bylaw needs to address. I am in a situation where my family and myself have been subjected frequently to noise and distress of multiple animals within less than 50 meters of our property, consistently barking, and the lack of restraint of their owners. I cannot allude to the specific reasons that these individuals decide that it is appropriate to let their dogs bark consistently. I cannot allude to what has happened in the course of interactions that have been taken by the township, by a law enforcement officer, but I can tell you that whatever enforcement actions have been taken, or not, that it does not seem to register with certain individuals of this community. As it stands, I have personally had multiple anxiety attacks brought upon by one specific neighbor of ours for the flagrant behavior of consistently putting their dog outside on the hour, every hour, for the express purpose of annoying us. Bylaw enforcement will not do anything to curb this because the current bylaw as it stands says the dog has to consistently bark for an hour. But I tell you right now, a dog being put out every hour for 20 minutes, 10 hours a day, is worse than just a single 1 hour barking session. There have been multiple occasions where myself and my family have been forced to leave our home of over 30 years simply because we can no longer stand the sounds of our neighbors' dogs barking. These individuals and their lack of respect for others and their privacy has had a significant effect on the emotional and physical well-being of my family and myself included, and this is completely unacceptable. Over the years, the one thing that has been repeated to us in the course of attempting to resolve issues with barking has always been, dogs bark, get over it. I am not exaggerating in this statement. It has been said multiple times in verbatim by your own staff members and the OPP. I will say this, dogs do bark, but when they bark consistently and frequently, it is only because they are not properly trained or controlled. It is the owner's responsibility to ensure that their pet is acting appropriately, and it is the township's responsibility to ensure owners are acting responsibly. I implore you, members of the council and other township staff members, that going forward with this new bylaw means you are agreeing to uphold the responsibility of ensuring the pet owners are complying with the law as written, without interpretation, in a timely and efficient manner. For the sake not only of the pet owner, their neighbors, myself, but the good of the community. Simply put, pet ownership is a responsibility, not a right. It falls upon you as a township to see that individuals understand this and that you do not waver in your responsibility as mandated by law, both provincially and federally, to enforce bylaws which you enact. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Next, we have Laura Carrie or Tim Anderson. Which one is going to show up? Tim? Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hearing all of us speak tonight. Would you? So I'm speaking here today about some of the proposed bylaws for the chicken, keeping of backyard hens and chickens. I'll be bringing up two main points, but I'm passing around a copy of some points that were in a petition that was left around Centre Wellington and Fergus and Elora, and also collected some signatures at the Elora Farmers Market. So who may I leave that with, or what would be the best place for that? Thank you. The points I'm bringing up today are 11.3. In the proposed bylaw, there's a restriction of 4 hens per household. And the group that I'm representing, Centre Wellington Backyard Poultry, is recommending that we allow 10 per household and align with the City of Guelph bylaws regarding backyard poultry. I have a family of 3 right now, soon to be 4, very clearly. And some mornings we have 2 eggs each, and that's 6 eggs. And if we have just 4 hens, there's just no way that we could keep up that and actually provide that small part of our food for our household. As well, I don't want to have to get rid of hens because they've stopped laying. I'm not sure if any of you have kept hens before, but after 5-6 years, you know, their egg production can be reduced, and for some hens, it can stop completely. And with a 4 hen limit, that's to suggest that they have no more value than just for the eggs. And if I can keep up to 10 hens, I should be able to have, you know, 5 or 6 hens that are in really nice laying capacity at any one time without having to dispose of hens simply because they've stopped laying. And they can live out their lives, and we can have them as pets and respect their life and honor them that way. So that's what we are suggesting, and the signatures on the petition also favor that. The other point I will be bringing up is in section 12. There was something mentioned earlier about not having to register each hen, and that's something we strongly agree with. As it's been mentioned many times, the bylaw officer in our area simply does not have the resources, nor would our township, I'm assuming, want to pay for such a strict registration policy. So as our petition suggests, it's a one-time coop registration. Also, some people don't own the hens that they keep, they rent them. So if they were to have to register each hen, then they would have to register each year, and it would just be very redundant. So we're suggesting registration of a coop instead of the hen, but it seemed to suggest at the beginning of our session today that that's something you are already considering. As well, the inspection of coops. We would suggest, like any other pet, if we are to own backyard poultry, we are respected, that we will keep our facilities, our house, our coops in working order. We are not required to inspect a cat's litter box or a dog's backyard every time we register one of those pets. So what we would suggest is that inspections would be based on complaints. If there is a lot of smell, if there's a lot of noise, if there's complaints from neighbors as far as the look or upkeep of a coop, then an inspection would be necessary. Other than that, it's just a simple one-time registration like any other pet. And the signatures on the petition, as you can see, support that as well. And that's everything I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Next, we have Tim Height. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I do not live in your township. I'm one township to the north. We've got exotic animals, and that's one of the things I'd like to address here tonight. But there's actually a couple of points, but you alluded to, I was to ask why you were changing your bylaw to include these things, but you alluded to that at the start of the meeting. In your bylaw, you're prohibiting animals. Prohibiting, we would much rather regulation than prohibiting. It didn't work for alcohol way back when they tried to prohibit it. It drove a black market. It drove everybody underground. Right now, there's no law against exotic animals in keeping them. If we can regulate them, we're all for that. But to prohibit them, all that does is make everybody hide them. There is no black market right now because everything's legal. I can buy and sell kangaroos, we can buy and sell llamas, everything's above the board. As soon as you prohibit them, it drives them underground. It's still gonna happen. It just makes it illegal. It makes criminals out of people who want to be honest. Also, in your bylaw, dogs get an exemption. You can have 3 rabbits, 3 chickens, 3 rabbits, 4 chickens, but your dogs you can get a kennel license for and have more dogs than you have rabbits. Why is that? Why do dogs get the advantage? Why can we not do that as a regulation for the other animals as well? If we're looking, give us a license, instead of a kennel for dogs, we can have a kennel for kangaroos. The other thing that your bylaw in there, I was reading, rabbits, you're allowed to have 3. You have a lot of farmers here who supply abate rabbit packers with their rabbits. In there, in some of your wording, it says, except on agricultural land, your rabbits and chickens. It doesn't say that. So that prohibits the people who are growing rabbits for meat or the chicken farmers who are within your jurisdiction. To allude again to the vaccination, the rabies vaccination. For our children to go to school, our children have to be vaccinated. Unless I put together that I say for religious reasons I don't want them vaccinated, then our children don't have to be vaccinated. How come our dog has to be vaccinated? Again, I agree with the veterinarian or the doctor that was here. That should be up to the owner and his veterinarian. With your bylaw that you have proposed, what happens to our education system? Center Wellington is a rural community. 4-H plays a large part of the rural community. For myself and for my kids, growing up, they had animals in 4-H. What happens to that? Are they not allowed to keep their sheep? They've got 3 or 4 acres. It's not zoned agricultural, but they want to keep their sheep, learn how to use them, go and are in the 4-H class. So it's going to hinder our education of our young people. Lastly, I'd just like to reiterate that we don't want to prohibit. I would prefer regulation. I know it costs more. It's more upkeep. There's more people. It's more of a headache. But if you can regulate it, one of the speakers before was talking about the falconry license. In my reading of your bylaw, they could keep the falcons because they have a license from the provincial government to keep them. So that would supersede your bylaw. I may be wrong, but as I read it, that's the way it would read to me, because they have a license from the provincial government. Now you're shaking your head, ma'am. Is that wrong? Am I wrong? Oh, okay. All right, no problem. So I don't know if that's correct or not. Now, as far as exotic animals go, there is no provincial government or that gives us a license. OSPCA used to come in and inspect us. Now that they're gone, that program still goes on under the Ministry of Ontario. They have 4 inspectors who come out and inspect our facilities twice a year. Now, does that give us the ability to keep these animals within your jurisdiction? There is no license, but we are governed by the Ontario government. That's more of a question than anything, but so that's all that I have to say. I would prefer regulation rather than prohibiting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. I also have Melissa Watkins. Oh, sorry, you didn't even get a ticket to the thing here.
No, not to the back room.
Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Thanks, and thank you, Council, for considering this issue. I'm here today also with the Backyard Chickens group and CW Backyard Poultry. I have a little bit of a handout that we'll pass around that summarizes what's currently proposed in the bylaw, the best practices that we're aware of in terms of chicken keeping in Ontario and across Canada, and then what we're proposing is changes to the existing draft bylaw. But I'll limit my comments to 2 main points today. And so I guess I also, when I started looking at the bylaw, I was struck by the fact that it recommended that 4 square feet per bird was recommended in terms of coop size. I work at the University of Guelph, and with researchers, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold and I'm struggling with my voice a little. So I work with researchers at the University of Guelph and with the Poultry Research Station in Arkle currently. And I was also aware of animal health and welfare regulations and was surprised that what was recommended in the bylaw was not consistent with what we expect for chicken producers across Canada. So we're recommending that the requirements for coop size would be consistent with the National Farm Animal Council, which recommends 1 to 2 square feet per bird. And then I also wanted to comment on the requirement for chickens to stay in their coops. So currently, the way the draft bylaw is written, it requires, if I'm reading it correctly, that the birds would be cooped, so with a coop and a run, and that the entire property would also be fenced outside of the coop. And so that seems like overkill from my perspective. We have a small movable coop where our chickens remain contained. It's on wheels. We move it around our backyard. We have lots of distance from our neighbors. We have about a dozen neighborhood kids that enjoy coming to help with the chicken chores and dealing with the chickens in our backyard. We're here in Elora. I won't tell you where until I know where the bylaw is going. But it does feel like overkill to also require the whole property to be fenced. I could see if the property was fenced, we also would support the allowance of free-ranging chickens in a backyard, provided that the property was fenced or that the chickens were supervised, or having a contained coop with a contained run for the birds. And those were the 2 main points that I wanted to speak to tonight, but as you can see, we have a variety of concerns about the way that the bylaw is currently drafted as it pertains to backyard chicken keeping. I do hope that Centre Wellington can be a leader in this regard. As we know, this issue is a big deal right across Canada right now, and many other municipalities have done a good job to get this right. I think Guelph has been learning as they go and making some adjustments to their own animal control bylaw, but we do think that there is a lot to that we can learn from that municipality. And also the Centre Wellington Backyard Poultry Group has a lot of very informed, educated members in its membership, and we'd also be happy if there are other questions come up to talk with you at any time about recommendations for the bylaw. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa, appreciate that. Next delegation that we have is Sonia Cheng. Sonia? Welcome, Sonia.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Sonia Chang, and I am a resident here in Elora, and I am speaking as a new backyard chicken keeper and a member also of the Center Wellington Backyard Poultry Group. I've had chickens now since the spring, and my husband and I took this as an opportunity to introduce backyard keeping when we had a young girl this year, and it's been a wonderful experience to, I think, connect with our food supply and have my daughter witness and raise these animals. They are very much our pets, as well as gifting us every day with eggs. Today, I'm speaking specifically about item 11.4 and 13.1. They do connect in the sense that 11.4 proposes a minimum lot size of 500 square meters. We, at Center Wellington Poultry, propose that it is restrictive and too small. It impacts people who maybe live in new builds, in subdivisions. For myself, I am currently residing in a rental, and we have been lucky enough to have a landlord who permitted us to build a coop, but it is our goal to purchase a home in Center Wellington in the next year to 2 years, and it's a serious concern. And I mean, of course, we can talk about housing density and other issues of housing in Center Wellington, but I think that this lot size restriction will be prohibitive for not only myself, but anyone who lives in a smaller property, which also then leads into 13.1, which is recommending a 3-meter distance from your property line to build your coop. Our group recommends that we reduce that distance to 3 feet in accordance with our current building bylaws that are already in place, similar to building a shed or any other freestanding structure on your property. 3 feet, we feel, is sufficient. It does give space to your neighboring properties. We understand that the concern obviously would be perhaps smell or odor or noise, but we all agree that a well-kept coop can be properly maintained and in accordance with the other suggested bylaws of keeping your coop clean, it can be mitigated. And those are main items that we wanted to speak about today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. The last delegation that we have registered is Christy Mercer? Sorry, Mercier. It was writing, so I couldn't read it. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'm here to speak about is in favor of adding alpacas and llamas as an exemption to the prohibited list for animals being kept on agricultural properties. Yes, my name is Christy Mercier. I'm a local realtor, and my husband and I own Harmony Meadows Alpaca, a small alpaca farm south of Bellwood. We've been there since 2009. We currently have 31 alpacas and 1 llama. We have a farm store on our property. We take part in fairs and festivals, as well as offer tours of our farm to visitors. A little bit about alpacas and llamas. They're low maintenance, low impact, clean, quiet, peaceful. They've become quite popular with the general public as well as hobby farm owners in particular. OMAFRA classifies them as alternative livestock and allows for 8 alpacas per nutrient unit as per MDS, which is similar to goats. So that's kind of how much impact they expect them to have. They live for around 20 years. They have a gestation period of about 11 and a half months and give birth to just 1 baby. They're primarily raised for their fleece, which is considered softer and warmer than sheep's wool. They are also processed for meat by some farms. It's not something that we do. All of our fiber has been exclusively processed at Wellington Fibers, just outside of Elora as well. They're very hardy. They adapt well to our climate, especially if they are shorn once a year and provided with appropriate shelter and diet. They're not susceptible to many diseases. They don't carry a lot of things. On our farm, we, at a veterinarian's request or recommendations, we vaccinate them annually. Since we started our farm, we've been actively involved in many community outlets. The farm has been a sponsor of the youth rugby program with Highland Rugby in Fergus. We've also taken part in the Elora and Guelph Farmers Markets, Fergus Scottish Festival, and the Fall Fair. I can't remember exactly, but this year, next weekend, will be the 4th or 5th year that some of our animals will be at the Ag Awareness Tent at the Fergus Fall Fair. So anybody who hasn't met an alpaca, feel free. We've been members of Taste Real, the county's agricultural educational thing. Been on the Rural Romp every year that it's been offered. We've also, starting last year, have been invited to take our animals down to the university for College Royal. One thing that we have found is that the general public is extremely interested in alpacas. They're like the hot new thing right now. We do tours about 9 to 10 months of the year. Public and private tours for people to come and visit them. Currently, we're seeing about 40 to 100 people each week, and most of them are coming from outside of our region. We get often a lot of requests of, okay, well, we're coming up and we get to hang out with alpacas for an hour. We drove for an hour and a half. What else can we do? So we always have maps available at our farm. We actively encourage people to visit other places. On top of those sort of public and private tours, we also welcome youth groups, school and homeschool groups, as well as having retirement and home residents and organizations that work with children and adults with special needs to come out and spend an afternoon with the animals. If this bylaw is accepted as it's currently written, it would really affect not just us, but lots of other people who just have a couple of alpacas on their property. For us in particular, it would eliminate our ability to breed and sell animals and restrict us to what we have now, assuming that they could be grandparented. And basically, we would have no choice but to either give up on the farm or move. We would really rather not do that. So hopefully you'll agree to remove that restriction, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Great, thanks very much, Christy. Okay, now that's everybody that I had registered as delegations. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to this? Yeah, perfect. Come on up, state your name, and
my name is Kevin Bruff, resident of Elora.
what was your last name?
B-R-O-U-G-H, Bruff.
Okay.
Dog owner. I'm not going to say what I came here to say tonight because I've been listening to the people do their presentation, and hopefully the council recognizes that 12 people tonight have asked for change. One poor little old lady was a pro-dog person. I could appear like that. And 2 people are completely against antagonistic people who own dogs, which I can also be a representative of. All I wanted to do was point out a bit of a background in your own statistics and ask for you to seriously consider a scientific, maybe approach rather than a political approach. And the biggest complaint, me as a dog owner, I'm seeing is no person shall permit a dog to make a noise, bark, howling, or whining. So we can go over the logical conclusion. If you look at it scientifically, it's physically impossible. You cannot ask a dog not to whine or not to bark. So I will go with my first question, if I'm allowed a few.
We won't be answering the questions. You can ask the questions,
Okay.
but we won't answer them right now.
Okay, that's a real miss, because, you know, it goes against open and communicative government. So we'll go with who wrote the law, because they never considered that. If we're going to point out the scientific stuff, it was very nice to find that there are comments received from the Guelph Humane Society that summarizes the following. There's a lot of things you have not included, including animals kept in cars. I will comment to that from a veterinarian who has a kennel license in Guelph, who runs competitive dogs and keeps more than 8 or 10 animals in her car at all times in kennels, because she runs them 4 to 5 times a day, still does her job, and always parks her car in the shade with the doors open. Dare you to approach the car. They also mentioned the most logical thing. Suggested regulations regarding barking should be within a noise bylaw. And I see that it is being mentioned here that we haven't reviewed our noise bylaw since Russ Spicer did it in February 15th, 2005. I go with trusting the specialists. As I said, let's take a scientific approach at this. Let's take 9 of the people who have presented before you tonight, presenting that you are overreaching with your raptor thing because there's already licenses within Ontario, that you're legally not hitting the mark, that you haven't reviewed the nature of your community, which is urban, rural, and educational with Guelph, that you're not considering the animals. So I'm going to make one suggestion, only one suggestion only, that is you look at noise bylaw, you review noise bylaw, and you give it some teeth. Because you have bylaws around here that do not have teeth. And they are very well in effect, because unfortunately recently I've had to speak to numerous OPP officers that can't do anything about Ministry of Transportation regulations and the ability to control traffic in this community. And they say the bylaws that you're passing, once again, have no teeth. So can we go over the fact that you cannot stop a dog from barking, you cannot stop a dog from whining? I have a dog. He is a nice person, unlike the other person mentioned here tonight. He is a family member, and I'm looking at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least that I know are family members. And if somebody came after your family, what would you do? I would prefer that you seriously do some research, review all these bylaws according to the people who have presented before you tonight on chickens, llamas, exotic pets, and you review the dog bylaw and go after the word excessive. The only suggestion I'm going for. Because if you read the legal process, stopping a dog from whining or barking is physically impossible. But if you give an OPP officer or if you give a bylaw officer the word excessive, you can prove after 1 or 2 times that the poor unfortunate family who had the vindictive neighbor, and I don't know how you deal with them, is a bad owner and a bad pet owner and a bad dog owner. So I do support both sides. Mine is quiet. He's very well behaved, he's very well kept, he's very well looked after, and he's very well trained. And he is a clinic dog, and he looks after those who come in. So please, please, as I said, take a further and advanced scientific research and look at what you have proposed, because it seems to be very short in the wording. Look at the word excessive under noise bylaw. You may find something that has teeth. So when somebody does it repetitively and vindictively, they have help. But the rest of the pet owners, because my dog barked once at a squirrel, will not be told to leave the community. Thank you very much for your time. Really wish you could answer questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else wants to speak? Sure, go ahead, just state your name and...
My name is Irene Cole. I live in Elora, and I just want to talk about the cats.
Okay.
I do not want to have to register a cat for a license. Oh, my goodness. So in my lifetime, I've always had probably 2 cats in my house. But since I came to Elora, stray cats seem to come to my house. So I always seem to have, now I have feral cats. And they don't tame up real quick like you think. So I am certainly not going to register feral cats. They're all fixed now, thank God, to Cats Anonymous. They've all been neutered and spayed, and all have their shots. So I'm not interested in licensing them and won't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Irene. Anyone else?
I just love public speaking.
Haven't we seen you already, though?
Yes,
Yeah, no, you can only have 1 time to speak, sorry.
really? But
Yeah.
I'm not talking about chickens. The other concern that I had was.
No, sorry, one time to speak.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Aw.
Yeah, sorry, we just,
That's
we have
crazy.
certain rules. No, it's not really crazy. Anyone else? Yep. Come on up if you haven't spoken yet. It's not a free-for-all.
Hi, Barb Slater.
Welcome, Barb.
I didn't intend on speaking tonight. However, after hearing some of the people speak, I have reported dogs barking in the past when Joe Allen was in charge of the noise problem with dogs. And when I was doing some backyard work last summer or the summer before, one of my neighbors went to work and the kids went to school and the dog was left in the backyard all day. And I listened to that dog bark all day. And if you can't enjoy your backyard, you know, we all pay taxes, we all want to enjoy our backyard in our time without noise, and barking dogs are just something that grates on you. And in fact, last night, I was awakened at about 3:15 with a dog south of Bellside, barking its head off and howling. And that went on for over half an hour. And when you've woken up in the middle of the night listening to that, and you're trying to get back to sleep, and it's just bark, 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 howl, bark, 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 howl. And in our neighborhood, there's a few people that insist on putting their dog out at 5:30 in the morning. And it must be while they're having their breakfast and their shower and their shave or whatever else they're doing, getting ready for work, and the dog's outside barking nonstop. Again, it starts when they get home for supper and they're home from school and they're doing whatever, the dog's outside barking again, on and on and on. That's barking that bothers people. If you walk by someone's house, I own a dog. He's a big suck. He's a 100-pound golden doodle. Some of you have met him. And when someone passes our house, yes, he'll bark. He's doing his job. His lot is his territory. And he's warning us or letting us know there's someone out there. We're very good at making him quiet down. He's very well trained, and we just have to say, do you want to go in the house? And he's quiet, because he'd rather be outside than inside. And, you know, if you're a responsible pet owner, you should be able to control your dog and make them be quiet and have them indoors. And we do need to have bylaw that will fine people if they have a dog that they're going to let bark uncontrollably. It's just not fair to their neighbors. And something's got to be done about it. And that's all I want to say. Wait, I almost forgot. The number of dogs. I don't understand why we're going from 2 dogs to 3 dogs within town. Maybe farm dogs, yes, but in town, with houses being built on smaller lots, and we've got barking issues, and we've got people that don't stoop and pick up their dog poop, why do we need people being allowed 1 more dog? That's foolish. We don't need people in houses with small lawns that can hardly, you know, be enough land for 1 dog to now have 3 dogs if they want. It just doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Barb. Saw another hand up. Who do we got in the corner there? Yeah, come on up.
Good evening. Thanks. I wasn't planning on speaking. I didn't know about this until 4:30 today. I'm Joel Bate. I'm in the township next to yours. I own a Bate Packers. And this is Michelle as well, sorry. She's the president of the Ontario Rabbit Growers Association. My family's been processing rabbit in Arthur for 52 years now. And I would hope you would consider in your 11.1 to change or add, except on agricultural property. Because there's quite a few of our suppliers are in this area, and it's going to affect them if they're only allowed 3. Quite a few of them have 50 to 100 to 1,000 in their barns already. So I don't consider it, well, I know they're pets. There's some that are, ours are for human consumption, and we also make pet food, so. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, yeah, you want to add something? Sure.
Yes, I agree. I'm with the Ontario Rabbit Growers Association, but we also do cover a bit of the pet stock industry. So there are commercial rabbit pet stock. So I realize there's puppy mills and there's kennels and everything else. I would like to also amend in there, could you please add pet rabbits as needing to be registered for the rabbitries?
So okay, we got your point. Sorry, what was your name again?
Michelle Sanders, Ontario Rabbit.
Awesome, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, come on up.
Hi, my name is Taylor Valentine. I've got a couple points here that I would just like clarification on. One of them has to do with the fines up to $50,000 for a first offense. Seems like a lot of money, as well as the continuation, which is the $100,000 for a second offense. I get that those limits are probably there, so you can scare people into not breaking these, but if God forbid you do something you don't know you've done wrong, you do a thing, $50,000 is a lot more than any regular person can afford. So that should be looked at. The second thing has to do with impoundment, 8.2. The wording on that really should be reconsidered. It seems to imply that if someone were to accidentally let your animal out, gets hit by a car, maybe you're not there, someone could choose to euthanize that, even if, say, you were there or you got on the phone with them, you would maybe pay for that surgery. The word injured, something there needs to happen. There just needs to be some sort of protection so that people's animals aren't just put down if they are like casually skimmed by a bike or something if they get out. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Yep, come on up.
My name is Mavis Bedford. I currently don't live in this township. I'm from southwest Middlesex, and I'm going to move to this area. As you can see, I have a dog with me who is a service dog in training. The municipality that I come from do not charge for the license for service dogs or trainee service dogs. So I would like this council to consider making the same policy. A lot of townships do not charge for service dogs. They will still register them. We still get a dog tag. They're still registered with the council, the township, but we don't actually have to pay for it. So I'd like you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she hasn't barked all night.
No, she hasn't. She's good.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Lum. I'm a resident of Fergus. I'd just like to speak in regards to the issue of dogs at large. I am a dog owner and I love dogs, but I find, I guess, in regards to perhaps enforcement or education regarding dogs at large, I find that there seems to be a lot of dogs that get off their property and will charge at either people or people with dogs. And this has been a problem that's personally impacted myself and my family. My dog last week we were just walking down St. Andrew East, there was a dog that got off its property and attacked my dog. And that's the second time within 10 months. And the first time it happened in December, my spouse Stephanie got in between to try to break up this dog that got off its property and attack my dog. And she was bitten in the process. She ended up at the ER in Groves, and public health got involved, the OPP got involved. It seems like we walk our dogs every day, and it seems within a month we'll get charged by dogs at least once or twice per month. We're also involved in dog rescue, and we were fostering a dog at one point that had some anxiety and reactivity issues, and of course we're trying to socialize the dog and deal with the dog's problems, work through their anxiety. Any progress that we were making would just go down the drain when we're walking leashed on a sidewalk or on a municipal street, and a dog just comes charging out, and the reactive dog just loses it. So I'm not sure if this is so much an issue within the bylaw that can be dealt with, or in terms of enforcement, or if it's just an educational issue that you can, I guess, deal with. The mentality here that I mean, it was a small town, but the whole township is growing rapidly. Population density is increasing, and the same thing with the number of dogs. The density of everything is increasing here, and everybody's in closer proximity. And it just seems that this is a problem that can be easily overcome if people were more responsible with their ownership of their dogs and just their management of their dogs. And that's what I'd like to speak with. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. We heard a lot of really, really good presentations today, so I really appreciate your time to come out here and get involved in this. I want to reiterate a couple things. The first thing I want to reiterate is this is a public meeting to get this input. Nothing here is carved in stone. As you can appreciate, when you move ahead with a comprehensive animal control bylaw, there's lots of different viewpoints. And I know municipalities across the board have a difficult time getting it just right. So that's why we wanted to have this public meeting, is because we wanted to hear your thoughts on this, and we heard some really, really good things tonight, and I really appreciate that. I did want to point something out that the deputy clerk did try to mention in what she was saying off the top, and it has to do with the noise and the barking and having a little more definition about that. What Lisa tried to do at the beginning, and I think that this is important. Because if you read when it talks about the noise, there is a definition of noise, and that's what Lisa was talking about. It's a sound that is at the point of reception is likely to disturb the inhabitants. So that's something that is in there, even though it looks like you're not allowing a dog to bark. If you look at what the definition of noise is, we're trying to attach it to noise, not just barking. So that's, and the other thing I wanted to add is, as like our deputy clerk mentioned, a noise bylaw is also being rewritten. So one of the things that we are doing is we're going through all our bylaws right now to make sure that we can do a better job enforcing them. That's one of the challenges that we had in the past. One of the challenges that we talked about is that we don't have the enforcement because they don't have the right clauses in our current bylaw, and it's not consistent across all of Center Wellington. So I think you heard some stories today about why we need this bylaw, but we do want to get it right, and we are going to take this input. And appreciate all the time that went into putting the presentations, and thanks for sticking to the 5 minutes. I know it's difficult to condense all your discussions into 5 minutes, but you can appreciate we'd be here till probably 2 o'clock in the morning if we let everyone go off. But we really appreciate you taking the time to come today. I'm going to turn things over now to have a discussion at council, and we're going to go through some things. Our deputy clerk laid out some of the areas that our staff need to get council direction on. And I just want to make it clear here that this is a council discussion now. We've heard the input. We're not going to have councillors talking to the citizens right now. This is something we're going to have councillors debate with councillors. So that's the way it works. And so I'm gonna turn things over to council right now, and we're going to kind of go through the last page that Lisa pulled up, where she's requiring direction from staff. So let's cross off those things first, because staff really need that direction. And then if things weren't covered off and you heard something today from the different delegations that you want us to talk about and provide some direction on, then let's go there as well. Okay? So the first item there is, should I leave people 30 seconds to take off? You don't want to hear this riveting council discussion? Remember, everything's live streamed, so if you want to hear what we talk about, you can go after the fact to centerwellington.ca and check out all of our conversation on that. And you can also provide more input over Connect CW. It's still open. It's still on that online forum as well.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. I just checked.
She closed it. No.
Reopen it. That's fine. It's still there. Okay. So the first item that we have to talk about as council is proceed with the voluntary registration of cats in 2020 and full licensing cats with a fee in 2021. Who wants to start that off? Because we did have a discussion about how sometimes it seems like the dog owners are paying for the whole kit and caboodle, and we wanted to think about if there's a need for cats to be registered. Councilor Kittrus.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we should drop this one about the cats. I think from the public input and it's all about dogs. Like, I didn't hear about cats attacking other people and other animals, and I didn't hear about cats, you know. It was feral cats. That's the issue with the cats. And it's not, and I think that we need to talk about that problem as opposed to registering all the cats. A lot of and there's a real distinction from a lot of the literature, letters and emails and Facebook stuff. Just, there's indoor cats and there's cats that go outdoors. And it's the ones that are outdoors. And so that's really the distinction there. And I think we need to sort of, rather than going on this registration thing, like if they're indoors, why would they register? They're always indoors. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this cat registration.
Councilor Dunsmore.
So I've gotten feedback from local residents on the opposite end. I had a lady ring my doorbell and hand me a bag of cat dung from neighbors' cats that they let run freely. And she also informed me that she has a $2,000 vet bill for her 2 cats that never leave the house because cats that neighbors let out are tormenting the cat at the window, so they're getting stress sores. So what it always comes down to for me is good pet owners versus bad pet owners. And as much as people are good pet owners, I'm a good dog owner, but I have to pay $45 for my dog. My dog doesn't leave my house unless it's on a leash. It stays in my yard. I walk my dog, I clean up after my dog, I'm a good dog owner, but I pay the $45. So if you've got a cat in the house and you never let the cat out, you never buy a license, it's not a problem. But once you let your cat out and it doesn't have a license, that's where it's a problem. So I am for licensing cats. But again, we've heard over and over here tonight that none of this matters unless we have some way of enforcing it. And we also need to put some kind of a fine schedule into this bylaw so that when somebody does break one of the bylaws, they can be fined.
Okay, cats. Councilor McElwain.
First of all, I'd like to start off by saying this has been a wonderful exercise. I've learned more about different kind of animals during this period than I have learned, I think, before in my life, and I grew up on a farm. So it's been great that way. The one statement that Tim Height made tonight, which I think we should take into consideration for every point here, which is we should be regulating versus prohibiting, because I think that's the problem, as Neil has pointed out, is that it isn't the pet, it's the pet owner quite often. We're regulating the wrong end of the leash, as far as I can see, and we need to have fines well defined. One of the people that wrote to us gave us an example from the town of Thorold, and if you look at their fine schedule, it's very complete, and it'd be easy to adapt that kind of thing, I think. So we do need the fines well defined. As far as cats specifically, I think Neil also hit the nail on the head there. For indoor cats, it shouldn't be an issue because they're never going to be out to be penalized anyhow. For outdoor cats, there needs to be some way for the owner to be identified and fined if they're not taking care of their animal.
Okay, before we go too much further, I just want to talk a little bit, as far as the schedule of fees and all that kind of stuff, that has to come in. And that's gonna be developed after our staff know what we're doing, right? So let's focus on CAT. Councilor Van Leeuwen.
Thank you. My concern is again, we speak about the feral cats and how do we deal with these cats running around the neighborhood. The difficulty is if we round up all the cats that are running around the neighborhood, you're going to get house cats as well. And if they're not registered, how do you know the difference between a house cat and a feral cat? So there's the difficulty of saying, if we want to deal with one, we almost have to register the other. So it's almost a process of elimination. So if we don't register the cats, the house cats, and the owners don't register, then they will end up running the risk long-term if we deal with feral cats. And that's my concern. So therefore, I feel that the only way to proceed with the feral cat problem is to register cats. So I think we have to come up with some type of solution there. Thanks.
Councilor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I'm also in favor of registering cats in general. I used to be a cat owner, used to be a dog owner. I also experienced what other people complained about in terms of the cats come through, and the cats that are coming through my place, they're well domesticated cats, well looked after. They're clearing out everything as they go through, so the birds disappear, whatever. But what I'd like to see is when we're considering the license fees is we look at lower fees for cats, and that we also consider for seniors over a certain age, that we also look at even reduced rates, because for seniors, these animals are companion animals. But what I also would like to see is for those people who are irresponsible pet owners, that we have significant fines for when their pets are caught.
Councilor Foster, you want to talk about cats?
Thank you, Your Worship. I like cats very much. My father was a veterinarian. The one thing I wanted to say is I don't think microchipping should be strictly required. It should be voluntary. I can see both sides of this argument on whether to license them or not. In my view, cats aren't the problem here. It's more some of the delegations spoke about being attacked while walking their own dog, things like pit bulls and so on. I think that's the bigger issue here than cats. So those are my comments.
Councilor McWayne?
Thanks, Kelly. I just wanted to follow up on Stephen's comment about house cats versus feral cats. I'm referring to house cats versus outdoor cats, not necessarily feral cats. The outdoor cats can be pets as well. And I'm just saying that if somebody has cats that are pets, but they allow them to go outdoors, then they should be licensed. If they don't allow them to go outdoors, then they, number one, wouldn't be caught if they didn't license them, but I don't think there's any, we should bother asking them to license.
I guess the challenge that I see with that is everybody's going to say if they want to get away with having to register, everybody's just going to say they don't let their cat outside, and then they're just going to let their cat outside if they want to. So how do you, like, a cat doesn't come with this, a sticker that says outdoor or indoor. So I guess it's hard from enforcement. I mean, my challenge with enforcing cats is, you heard tonight, a lot of people were talking about how we have a hard time already enforcing the bylaws that we have. My challenge is the staff time it's going to take to enforce it. So I'm not in favor of registering cats. I don't think we have enough issues to deal with already. I don't feel like we need to take on another one. Councilor Kitchens?
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't get to that point, but I agree with you. The issue is when we do pass this bylaw, there is real concern that we actually can enforce it and we can do it. And I think that it's sort of already listening to the variations and everything like that, you would need like 2 or 3 bylaw officers to do all that stuff. So, I mean, the more rules and more regulations you have, the more I mean, you're gonna have an army practically. And so that's the thing here with the cats. I think that we should give it a pass. I think the issue is the feral cats and the wildness and spraying and that part of it. That's the issue with those cats. And that's a different issue. Maybe it's with the Humane Society picking them up more, or and that's how I see it. I think that people should talk to their neighbors and tell them that if their cat's wandering on their property, that just start that whole process. But to go about licensing and then every cat that's wandering, picking them up, is going to be a fortune.
Councillor Finland?
Thank you. I have to ask a question. We say here proceed with voluntary registration of cats and then go to full licensing of cats in 2021. Do we, if we're going to deal with feral cats or cats of issues, do we understand the full implications of the cost to us to register? Because this right away says full licensing of cats. Is there a way to step that where we say voluntary licensing of cats and investigate the cost of full registering? Because if somebody wants to register the cat to ensure it's not picked up and it gets returned back, that's very different than the cost of us trying to enforce all these other with bylaw officers and create these laws. So have we brought that all together in a report of cost from staffing?
Well, I mean, nobody's going to register a feral cat because they don't own, nobody owns it, right? So that's not going to, like, the registration of cats is not going to even hit that at all. Nobody's going to register what they don't own, right? So, I mean, I don't know if we would have any costs from the Humane Society of what enforcing cat registration, what adding that service to our Humane Society bill. I'm not sure what that is. Have we talked to them about that?
No, not completely. I believe the registering of cats was not about ferals or scooping up domestic cats in the neighborhood. It was more about a balance financially, the revenue to pay for the services of the Guelph Humane Society, which are, that was council's direction to staff in the licensing of cats. It was not to clean up neighborhoods and scoop up cats. It was to balance the revenue.
Councillor Van Leeuwen, follow on.
Sorry, my concern is more like, so if we scoop up a cat, what's our liability to say, oh, okay, well, they can, what's the right word for that, dispose of the cat? Are we liable if it's not registered? They say, well, euthanize it, thank you. They euthanize the cat. Are we responsible in any way of registering or saying, well, you didn't register your cat, therefore, like, how does that, that's really where I'm looking.
Well, I'd like to make it clear that the Guelph Humane Society goes to extreme lengths to adopt the animals out that are found running at large, unlicensed. They do not euthanize on a will. They certainly go to extreme lengths to adopt dogs and cats out. So, but again, I just want to make it clear that I think the reason we went to the registration of cats was to balance the revenue to pay for their services.
Yeah, that's a good point. Councillor Foster?
The one point I'd like to make, Your Worship, is I like the idea of proceeding with voluntary registration, because what that will do is responsible owners of cats can voluntarily register the animal, and if that animal should be lost, it's the best tool we have to return the animal to its rightful owner. So I think we should consider the voluntary registration in the clause on the paper here, but not make it strictly required.
So there would be a cost involved. So I guess the question is, so who would be paying the cost? Like, would it be through, what are you thinking? Councillor Foster?
What I would be thinking is if I'm a responsible pet owner, I'd be happy to pay a nominal fee to register the cat because I know that if that animal ever is lost, there's a far greater chance that it'll be returned to me. So a nominal fee would be happily paid by many responsible pet owners.
Councillor McElwain?
I believe that service is basically already provided by voluntary microchipping. And it's a one-time cost for about the same price as registration. And any vet can identify the animal versus having to take it to the Humane Society. So that service is already there for pet owners that want to do it. I mean, we do that with our dog, even though we also register it, but it's microchipped as well. And anybody can do that with cats or dogs.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, so registering dogs is pretty much voluntary too, because we don't go knocking on doors and say, how many dogs have you got in there? You haven't got a license. So there are probably thousands of dog owners in the township that have not bought licenses. That's the game they play. So if cat owners don't want to buy the license, they don't have to. But we had this discussion during the budget last year when we were talking about how much we pay to the Humane Society and where we get the money from it. So if you own cats, you are not paying anything towards those fees. If you own dogs, you're paying towards those fees. And because we don't take enough fees, if you don't own pets, period, it's your tax dollars that are subsidizing those fees. So we should be licensing cats and taking a reasonable amount of money, the same as dog owners, or if we want, we can lower the one for dogs and kind of balance them between dogs and cats, but I don't see why cat owners are allowed to own pets without having to pay for any of the Humane Society costs that we put out there.
Councillor Vinland?
Thank you. I guess this didn't get on my radar financially. I know that discussion got there for sure. But it was mostly on my radar because I know there's some houses where there's, 20, 30, 40 cats living all around them, and the neighbors have to live with this. And so then hopefully how do we deal with it? That's really the aspect. What would be the process, for example, if you have a pet owner and they realize their cats are jumping at the windows? They would call the Humane Society. Humane Society would come and try to trap these stray cats. Like what process have we got? Because right now we're talking about all these cat issues and trying to solve it with registering. We've got two things in our hands. Are we trying to solve that issue where they're eating birds and doing things, or are we trying to solve the financial issue? And I think those are the two pieces.
There's the two questions. One is going to be handled by this. The other isn't. The one that's going to be handled is the financial one because we're going to balance stuff off. If we provide a fee for registration of cats, we're going to do what we want, what we task staff to do. We're going to share the revenue with cat owners, so dog owners aren't paying for the whole thing. As far as feral cats, I don't see this as making any kind of impact on that at all. Like, it's not going to touch it because people aren't going to register. So we're only hitting the one piece. So that's where council has to talk about, is it worth setting this up to register cats for a fee? We can talk about the fee later, but does it make sense that we want to get into the business of registering cats for a fee? The dog agreed right away. She doesn't think it's fair.
No, he wants it. I'll second the motion.
So I think that was the nature of the discussion we had to put this on the table. That's the only one that's going to help with this. I don't know if there's not anything that new, then why don't we just have a vote on to register cats or not register cats? And then after that, if we want to move ahead with registering cats, we talk about the fee structure, right? Anything you want to add before we have a vote or if somebody moves something? I don't know what kind of high-powered meeting's going on. Is there anything you want to add before somebody moves something?
I just wanted to add, though, that if council gives us direction, we can certainly come back with recommendations on fees in the fees and charges bylaw, and we can certainly speak to the Humane Society about what the enforcement would look like. They already enforce cats. They do pick up, I believe, more cats than dogs. Their reports would indicate that. So we're not really going to change much. The only thing we would change is the registration and the fee structure.
Councillor McLean?
Thanks, Shelley. Do you know, Carrie, of the cats they do pick up, I imagine most of them are feral cats, but do they have a fair number of domestic cats that they find as well? And is there any way to return them in that case?
I've spoke to the Humane Society about cats, and their return rates on cats is about 10%. People, when they lose their cats, don't seem to want to come get them as much as they want to come get their dogs, so they end up adopting them out.
Yeah, follow on, Councillor McLean, yeah.
How do they know who to contact about cats too? They don't,
Well,
right?
they don't. It's the owner contacting the Humane Society, just like the owner may contact about an unlicensed dog. If they have the cat, then if the cats were licensed, then we would have the ability to return it home. Right now, if that cat is not microchipped, we cannot return it home.
Go ahead.
So I like to move that we direct staff to proceed with the voluntary, exploring the voluntary registration of cats in 2020 and a full licensing fee for 2021.
Can you define what you mean by explore?
Well, we need a fee structure, we need to what it's gonna cost us, and then what fee we're gonna establish to it. Is that too much, or you just want to proceed as written?
We just want to, yes, as written, any fees would, I mean, we're proposing the voluntary without a fee, and then we would bring back a suggested fee in the fees and charges during budget.
Okay, then I'll move that we proceed with the voluntary registration of cats in 2020 and a full licensing of cats with a fee in 2021.
Can I ask a question before it gets seconded? You didn't like that, I said that, but I'll ask it anyway. See, the challenge, you're making the assumption that we can't do a volunteer registration with a fee. And I don't know why we're making the assumption that if it's voluntary, it can't have a fee associated with it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're not finding anything out. What we need to find out is if the program is gonna work and people are gonna register their cats if it's costing money. So if we don't have a fee attached to voluntary, we're not gonna know what to do for phase 2, because we don't know if it works.
Then I'll go back to my original motion.
Just the way it's written. Can you add volunteer registration with a fee?
Isn't that what I said the first time?
I don't remember, it's been so long ago.
It has been. Okay, so we'll try this one more time.
Okay.
I move that the staff proceed with the voluntary registration of cats for 2020 and establish a fee for that program in 2020, and then move towards a full licensing of cats in 2021.
Okay, that's good, that's clear. Seconder, Councillor McCray. Any more discussion? Moving, Councillor McLean?
I'd like to amend that slightly to say, and I'm not sure exactly what the words are, Carrie, you can do this better than I can, but to investigate the full licensing of cats with a fee in 2021. I mean, what we're trying to do with the voluntary registration is determine whether it's a good plan or not. So instead of saying proceeding with full licensing in 2021, I think we just want to determine the viability of full licensing or something along that line. I don't want it to be a predetermined thing that we are going to go to full licensing, because that may not be the right solution.
That's what I get. That's what I got behind his.
See, through you, I think staff's idea of a voluntary registry was without a fee. You volunteered to see, what am I trying to say? If you're going to full licensing, that's a fee, basically. you're charging a fee. The voluntary registration was simply finding out where the cats are and how many cats we have and who's got them and whether there was whether people would voluntarily license. It was a way of phasing in the licensing of cats. So it's not really voluntary if you're charging them. You're either charging them and licensing them or you're not.
Well, that's kind of why I asked for the assumption, is because, but you see, but your case test with the pilot, though,
No find.
if you don't charge a fee, you don't know if all of a sudden you slap a fee on, then, oh, nobody wants to register it. So they're just registering it because there's no fee. And so you don't know if there's going to be uptake with a fee.
Right.
So I just don't think it'll do what we want it to do.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I don't understand why you can't have volunteer with a fee. Like,
Well, it's not really voluntary. You're regulating the licensing of cats. So you must license your cat. It's voluntary, you would just take that out. It's the registration and licensing of cats. No,
I
it was
don't know.
seconded.
It
Yeah,
was
but I
seconded.
need clarification.
Are you pretty clear on the wording, or?
Yeah, I'm pretty
Because
clear
not.
on my thoughts, so why don't
Okay.
I just put my motion forward? You can either vote on it or defeat it. I think staff should proceed with the licensing of cats in 2020 and in through 2021. Let's just get rid of the volunteer thing and set a fee, license the cats. That's my motion.
Okay, and were you gonna second that anyway? Okay. All in favor? Oh, gosh, really? Okay. Councilor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I just want to refer back to what Township Clerk was mentioning about the Humane Society is currently picking up more cats than dogs, yet to date, it's been dog owners who have been paying all the fees, and yet it's the cats that are being picked up. So I think this is another reason why we are considering licensing cats as well as dogs, so that there's more equal payment of the Humane Society fees.
No, I think you got the rationale down for sure. Okay, move to vote. All in favor of that? Opposed? And that's defeated. That's one. Next item that we have is increasing the number of dogs from 2 to 3. I wonder if we should get the dog to see what they think about this one. Oh.
She said 3.
Did she? Increasing, we've heard both sides tonight, and I'm sure you've heard other things from your residents and your citizens, and what's people's thinking, from 2 to 3. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to speak against this item. I think 2 is plenty in an urban environment. It's a recipe for problems with 3, especially as we urbanize and grow smaller and smaller lots. It's 2 dogs are plenty in my view.
Councillor Van Loon.
Thanks, and I agree. I'm shocked that people want 3 dogs in their little homes, so, but maybe I've never been there, but I think 2 dogs, especially with the amount of problems we're having with dogs and we hear around, it seems sufficient to have 2 dogs, so.
Any other? Councillor Dunsmore?
No, I'm for it. I don't think that we should limit people. That 3 dogs is fine. 2 dogs, my yard is big enough, I could have 5 dogs and not have a problem. If they've got a small house, they're gonna have 2 dogs. They'll probably only have 1 dog, but, are we limiting the number of cats in a house? We haven't done that yet, have we? We don't worry, we can't keep track of it because we're not licensing them anyway. So to limit then the people who are paying the bills to 2 seems a bit unfair.
Councillor McElwain.
Thanks, Kelly. I agree with Neil on this one. I think 3 is fair. If somebody has a yard large enough to handle 3, or a house large enough to handle 3, then I think they should be allowed 3. Related to this, there was also a clause in the proposed bylaw that said you can't have more than 3, even on a temporary basis. I do have problems with that line, just because I know we dog sit for our daughter, and they bring 2 extra dogs to our house for a week at a time. and we could be fined on that under the proposed bylaw. So that's part of the number of dogs. I think that needs to be changed as well.
I don't think that would cover because you
The
don't
intent
own
of
the
the bylaw
dogs.
wasn't to restrict the number of visiting dogs at your house. Like, they're there, if your daughter brings her dog over, that's fine, but the dog should be licensed in the municipality that it is a resident of.
Anybody else on the 2 versus 3 dogs? Okay, so Councillor Kitchus.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that if somebody wants 3 dogs, they should have 3 dogs. Like, they just love dogs. But, you know, I don't like any dogs. But if they want 3 dogs, then I think that that's fine. My concern is, and it was said about the smaller urbanized lots. So we were going to restrict the chickens to somehow some square footage thing. I think we should have some sort of square footage thing for dogs. Like if your yard is really, really tiny, and I don't know, I just sort of feel like, because it went in confined spaces like that, maybe there would be more problems or whatever. But I don't think we should be restricting them. That's just, I sort of feel like there should be some sort of, maybe some guidelines about the area.
No, I heard no. You don't like dogs. I knew what that meant. That meant no way. Anybody want to put a motion or more discussion on 3 versus 2? Councillor Dunsmore.
I'll move that we increase the number of dogs from 2 to 3.
Just do it all over again with your mic on.
Sure. I move that we increase the number of dogs from 2 to 3.
Seconder? All in favor? Opposed? That carries 3 dogs. But you don't have to have 3 dogs. Proceed with the limiting the number of small pets or remove the restrictions. So right now, the limit is, can we just go over the limits? You got 4 hens.
The hens are different.
Oh, they're separate, okay. So small pets.
Like guinea pigs and rats.
I kind of would like to move that we remove the restrictions completely. I don't think we have to worry about that. Anybody second that?
I'll second it.
Councillor Dunsmore, all in favor of removing the restrictions? And that carries. As many guinea pigs as you'd like. Proceed with permitting backyard hen coops with a 4-hen limit or bring back provisions to prohibit. What's people's direction on the hens? Councillor McElwain.
I like the option that was presented tonight of increasing that to a larger number. I don't know if it has to be 10, but I think certainly more than 4, just because 4 won't feed a family of 4.
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Thank you. I'm wondering if we can have the bylaw sit down, whoever, bylaw officer or Carrie or Clerk, sit down with Backyard Chickens in Center Wellington and review what they've proposed, because they're going to want to work through this in a responsible way because they want to keep it. So my recommendation is that we instruct staff to sit down with Backyard Chickens in Center Wellington to come up to discuss their recommendations and bring it back. Because I like what they've done.
Okay. Second it. Okay, we got a mover and a seconder for going back with the backyard chicken group. And now open for discussion. I want to just say one thing. I mean, staff have no directions as to what to talk to the backyard chickens about now. So can we provide them with some sort of direction as far as the number of hens based on what we heard? Like we all heard their recommendation tonight. I know, but it's in here, but it's not in here. So if council provides direction then they can go and then we can add the clause and talk to backyard chickens about.
Okay, so if the
About their
recommendation
stuff.
says that we direct council staff to speak with backyard chickens in Center Wellington about the flock size of the chickens, the coop sizes, free-range runs and fenced areas, and setback requirements for the coops.
And the number of chickens.
I thought I got that flock sizes at the beginning.
The flock side, yeah.
If there's a.
Okay, I want Mary Ann to speak here, because I want to make sure we're providing direction.
Sure. Through you, can you just add also lot size, because that was mentioned, that it was too restrictive?
Yeah, they went from they wanted 3 meters to the 3 feet.
The minimum lot size, though, is 500
Yeah.
square meters. They wanted that to be reduced.
And the other thing, the 3 meter setback to the
Setbacks,
3
yes.
feet setback.
Yeah, and that.
Okay, so I
you want me to read it
can't, no, I basically, it's to go back to them and kind of rejig this. I do feel like we gotta provide, a little bit more direction than that, though, like, in my mind. We're gonna vote on this in a minute, but, like, do we want, like, they're already recommending 10. So are we okay if they come back with 10? Like, I'm okay with that. So I'd like us to say that here, and then say, and work with backyard chickens on all the other modifications to the bylaw. So can you add, is that a friendly amendment that you can add in?
I think that's a great amendment, so just add to the beginning of mine that we, the beginning of the proposal is that we agree to adding 10 and that we recommend to staff or direct staff to investigate or speak with them on the other issues.
Okay. Second? You won't second that, okay, so you. But we'll get a seconder, well, we already had a seconder for that.
Yeah,
Well, who
Kitchers.
was it? Councilor Kitchers, okay, sorry. Councilor Dunsmore.
Okay, so I want to be cautious here because the people from Backyard Chickens in Center Wellington were wonderful people and I thought they gave a great presentation. But I've also heard from several residents who have had chickens in their neighbor's backyard and end up having chickens in their backyard. So I want to make sure that they get protection under this bylaw so that if we're putting something in, yes, that we may increase the number of chickens and yes, we might decrease the size of the coop and give them a run, but the run has to be such that those chickens don't get out of their yard and get into the neighbor's yard and start affecting the neighbor's quality of life. It's imperative to me that that gets protected.
Yes, that's a good point. Okay, Councilor McElwain?
Thanks, Kelly. I think just to Neil's point, that will be taken care of when the fines and fees are identified a little later in the process, I would think.
Well, only if we identify clearly what the restrictions are, and then the fines will be
Yeah.
associated to that, yeah.
I would assume that there's going to be some way to control hens getting out of their own yard kind of thing. I mean, that's kind of like animal, or dogs not on a leash. I mean, it's similar, except hens are slower, so you should be able to catch them.
Okay, are we clear on the motion? Do you have something to add to your motion?
Yeah, if there's something in here that we'd want removed out of there, then I would prefer to see a friendly amendment to the motion than to see an entire motion fall, just because we wanted to remove perhaps outdoor runs or something like that. So I would recommend a look at a friendly amendment than to have the whole thing fall apart.
Okay, how about we allow free-range chickens within a fenced run? Is that, do we have to establish a size of that, or, like, I just don't want them running, if you run free in your backyard and they get up over the fence, then they're your neighbor's problem. If you've got a coop with a run out front and it's fenced all the way around and fenced on the top, then the chickens can't get out, then your neighbors are protected. That's all I'm after. If we can put something in there like that, I'd be fine. So maybe it comes down to a fenced run.
Okay. Yeah, Councilor.
I think Stephen's recommendation or motion said that basically because it's, the proposal from Backyard Chickens is allow chickens to free range in runs, fenced areas or while under supervision. So I think that kind of captures Neil's concern, very honestly.
It does capture his concern if staff said, we're going to recommend what Backyard Chickens is saying. And that's, we didn't give them direction just to adopt Backyard Chickens proposal, right? So that's the only thing, is we just have to make sure, we have to make sure that there's limits put on the hens. Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Thank you. Can I,
Writing feverishly there.
well, I'm looking at maybe making a slight amendment to it then, that the motion is to allow flocks up to 10 chickens, ducks, or other small birds as neighboring municipalities do, and that we allow chickens to free range in enclosed runs, and that we direct staff to allow owners to design safe coops that meet their needs while adhering to National Farm Council guidelines, and that we allow chicken compost to be properly managed on residents' property in similar fashions to other home and garden compost. That's right. And that coops adhere to the same setback requirements as other buildings. And that staff review the square footage of the lots. So then there's nothing left. Thank you. And that staff doesn't review it. But it gives clear direction.
So it'd be 3. We could do 3 feet.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I think I would prefer maybe the original motion where we just have a conversation with them. Staff put these regulations in place based on other bylaws, based on all the research that we did, so that the impact to the neighboring properties was limited and mitigated. So we would really like to work with the group to see if we could come to some compromise, rather than picking pieces here and there. I think we'd like to sit down and review it with them more closely. We were told not to use the Farm Animal Care Council because that's specifically for agricultural areas. So we've been given some legal advice, and we would like to work with the group to see if we could come to something that everyone can agree on, because the impact to the neighbors is what we are concerned about the most.
Okay, so basically it's kind of what the first one was, but you have heard that there is direction to ramp up the numbers.
Oh, certainly. I just think if you're ramping up the numbers, we would like to have the conversation about keeping some of the other restrictions in place.
And that makes sense. So I don't know if a motion is required. Is it? Or is a motion required still? Just direction to staff to have discussions with Backyard Chickens in Center Wellington?
And come back with something.
recommendation. Okay.
Sure.
Is that okay? Is that what you meant to say in your motion?
Yeah, I think that is exactly where we wanted to go originally, and then that way staff would come back with something. But through this, staff has a clear direction where we want to go anyway, so it's good.
You okay to keep seconding that? Okay, all in favor of that? Okay, that's carried. Good work. Now, the last one that we have on this list is implement new exotic pet restrictions and proceed with registry for existing animals. Councillor McElwain.
Could I suggest a motion that we direct staff to work with or discuss with Lance, I can't remember Lance's last name. He had some wonderful recommendations on exotic animals and great knowledge, and I think having a discussion with him on the exotic pet program would be worthwhile.
Seconded by Councillor Kittress, working with Lance. Discussion from council? Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I know Lance had come up and he does bylaws for other people, but I was particularly interested in what Tim Height had to say from Tiger Paw Exotics about regulating as opposed to banning, because we don't want to create a black market. That's more what I was concerned about. So if he's willing to have a conversation with staff too, I'd like him to be a part of it.
A comment that I have, are we clear as a council that we want to regulate exotics? Do we want to get into that? Right now, we don't, right?
2 municipalities do.
Oh, I see, but across the center line, do we want to do it? First of all, we want to go through this process of regulating exotics? Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I think we have to, because I think banning them outright does create that group of people that will hide them in their homes or in their backyards, and if they want to have them, they'll have them. But if you regulate them, at least we know where they are, and we can educate them on how to better take care of them. But if you ban them outright, you'll get a black market, the same as unfortunately we have with drugs.
Anything specific, like in the last one, we provided good discussion and direction to staff so they know how that they're going to talk to backyard chickens. We haven't really done that yet for staff to help them if they have discussions with other people about what to change. So what we need to do is we need to provide some direction to staff about what they want to see different. Councillor Van Loan?
Thank you. Actually, at this point, I'd ask staff, how often do we actually get phone calls from residents with complaints? How do we deal with this? Is it an ongoing issue, or is it an issue that we happen to be adding in because we're doing the bylaw?
Just working from memory here, it does happen a handful of times throughout the year. We do get inquiries about owning different types of pets that can be dangerous to other people, so knowing where they are would be extremely helpful. I don't know if Carrie has anything to add to that, but we do get inquiries, questions, and complaints about them.
I think that was the idea behind the grandfathering and the registration, is that we'd rather know where they are so that we're aware of where they are. The restrictions are pretty limited. The prohibiting it's pretty limited, but we would rather know where the exotics are. We've had cases where the OPP had to go in and remove children from the home and find 250 snakes. We would really like to know where those are, and be aware of them rather than not know where they are. So that's why we've proposed a registration. And anything that legally existed would be grandfathered in. But we certainly would like to prohibit some, to regulate what we're proposing to prohibit would be extremely onerous to provide regulations for every animal. So I think the prohibited list that we have is quite common. It's similar to the Nicole bylaw and the Allura bylaw that are currently in place. We did recognize that we had llamas and alpacas, and some of those things were missed from the list, but staff still feel strongly that a registry and prohibiting certain species is important.
Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I guess a question to our clerk. Basically, the animals that we have on our prohibited list, are they not currently governed under provincial and federal acts in terms of whether or not you're allowed to have them, or you need to have licenses in order to have them? Like, for example, mongooses. Can anyone just go and get a mongoose, or are these things sort of already under the jurisdiction of a federal, provincial? In which case, we can do away with saying they're prohibited and just say these are the following animals that need to be registered.
Yeah, through you, I don't know. I think Mr. Height indicated that in Canada, they're not regulated, that you can own those things. I think in the United States, exotic pets are highly regulated, but it's really outside of my expertise. But I think the purpose of us prohibiting them is that so that they are not household pets, and they do not belong, those certain types, certain species do not belong in the township. That's staff's position.
Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Kelly. I think the area that seemed to jump out at me was the venomous snakes and reptiles. The phrase venomous that is medically significant to humans, if that was added, I mean, that's all he was suggesting is add that one phrase in there. And that gets rid of, 2,800 species of snakes that would now be prohibited, but wouldn't be prohibited in the future because they're venomous, but they don't harm anybody. And the same with snakes that are less than 3 meters long. I mean, they are pets for a lot of people, and why are we prohibiting them, I guess is the question, because they're not harmful to humans. So I do think that needs to be researched more, and, whether the recommendation from Lance is, and Mr. Height are the final or not is up in the air, but at least that discussion should take place. And the same discussion, I think, should take place concerning raptors. I would like to see that revisited as well for a licensed raptor, whatever, owner, trainer.
Councillor Kitchers?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this needs to be more information about this. We had the presentations. Some of these people are very knowledgeable about these exotic pets and lifestyles like raptors and stuff like that. And I don't know anything about that, and I understand. I don't think we should be restricting people. I'm actually amazed at the different varieties of pet owners and varieties of pets that they like. But, and I sort of feel like, I think we should just try to make it as non-restrictive as possible. But identify the ones that are, like, dangerous and certain protocols. And so that's why banning outright means that the bylaw is not as informative to someone that has a different pet. And so I think that's why we should consult with these other people and then come up with another additions.
Staff to remove the provisions.
Yeah, but that's what I asked first. Do we want to restrict? And I got back, yeah, we do want to restrict. So that's why I asked, should we just take this whole schedule out and restrict? And people said, no, no, no.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least Neil said, no, no, no. So I don't know, I think we're getting into some direction. We're getting opinions at least around the table. I like the falconer thing. To me, if a person has a falconer license from the ministry, to me, that's a pretty good exception that we can provide direction for the, what are those birds called? The raptors. So except in the exception where somebody has a falconer license from the ministry, that to me made a whole lot of sense, because looked after by another, does staff have any issue with that one? Can we change that? Is that okay? Are we okay with that direction? If you have a falconer's license, you're good to go. Okay, what about, so are we okay, any other direction that we want to provide based on what you heard tonight to staff? They're gonna go through the list and make sure it's clean and that, we do the venomous stuff. If it's venomous and harmful to humans, then we want that on the list, I would assume. Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I like the idea of engaging Lance Henderson to assist us in going through and identifying which are the truly venomous ones that we really need to be aware of, as opposed to, say, a honeybee or whatever. I'd prefer to have his input.
Through you, this bylaw does not pertain to bees. I think we should make that clear. Bees are not, doesn't meet the definition of animal.
I was just using it as an example
Yeah,
of
no,
different
but
levels
I-
of venom.
Yeah, we maybe should have made that clear, is that that does not meet the definition of an animal.
Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, I just want to make sure in this discussion, we're allowing llamas and alpacas now? Okay.
We are allowing, that's what I thought I heard. So llamas and alpacas are in.
Yes, I think staff made that clear that was.
That's
that
what I
was-
thought. Okay, that was another
yeah.
question I had. So welcome to Center Wellington, llamas and alpacas. Councillor Kittrus.
So have we decided that for the rabbits, there could be a lot of rabbits? Is that what we discussed one of the delegations?
We removed all small animal restrictions, yep.
And then, will bees be allowed in town? Okay.
Bees are not part of this bylaw, they're not animals. Are you guys okay with that section now, to go back and do a little bit of work and bring it back to here? Are you guys okay with that? Okay. Okay, so, so that's the list that we had, from Lisa. There's a couple other things that came up in our discussion today, that I think we should cover off. One of the requests was a modification to section 2.2. No person shall be let me just read it from the 2.2. Oh, shoot, my thing shut down. No person shall, no, not that one.
2.2?
Yeah, 2.2, no person shall permit a dog to make noise by barking, howling, or whining. And then 2.3 says, no person should keep or harbor, permit or keep harbored any one time three dogs, or now we're at 2 dogs on a property or per dwelling. And then there was a request made on the whining part not to also be included facilities listed in 2.4. So taking out, the other way to do it is just remove the exception for a facility registered as a research facility in accordance with Animals for Research Act as amended. The whole thing? Okay, so one of the questions that we had, or one of the delegations that came forward, talked about the whining, the dogs, and all that kind of stuff. We've said that facilities registered in a research facility, which that was, is excluded from the noise, the barking, the noise from a barking dog. That's how I read it. Councillor Van Loon?
Thank you. If you read it, I think if you want to remove the excluding the facility, that would be the easiest way to deal with that.
Kelly?
100.
It refers to 2.3, not 2.2.
Yeah, sorry, they were using the old bylaw as their thing, so that's why my numbering was mixed up. Can you just help us on that one, Carrie?
Well, yes, what I'd like to say is because our noise bylaw is currently under review, this noise provision was included in this bylaw to give staff an opportunity to look at barking and to have some enforcement mechanism, which we don't currently have. But this is not the appropriate bylaw to be enforcing noise control. The noise bylaw is the appropriate place. We've been given that legal advice. It's in here because it's not in the noise bylaw currently, and it's not, it's under review, and we're working on a stronger noise bylaw. But the location it's in here because it's not in the other one. This is not the appropriate mechanism to be enforcing noise bylaw. So to make any adjustments other than what's been recommended, I'm not sure whether that actually helps or hinders our process in having it included here.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, the only concern I have is that, I mean, even if we put this in, and I'm actually all for putting it in, the particular research facility that is in question is going to be grandfathered anyway on this because they were operating under an old bylaw, correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I think when it comes to noise, it's a little different. Grandfathering is generally a use.
Okay.
That's permitted or not permitted, but noise is a little different to qualify.
My main goal in supporting this and supporting the noise from barking or howling or whining animals, dogs or any other animal, is I don't want to see a facility like this permitted again without residents having some kind of protection from the municipality. And right now, we have one there, and if we put this in now, it prevents it from happening again. Personally, I think this was a mistake made by a previous council that's allowed this situation to happen, and I don't want to see this council make a mistake going forward that would allow it to happen again.
Well, through you, Mayor Linton, if I could, this is a use that has been permitted to happen. This bylaw does not regulate land use. That's your zoning bylaw. So in order to prevent this from ever happening again or having a situation like this happen again is through zoning. It's not through animal control. So by putting that provision in there, that's what I had indicated. I'm not sure it solves any problem. It might actually make things worse. But through land use and through your zoning amendment, that's how you prohibit these types of things. We inherited this situation from West Garifraxa, and without proper planning tools, we have not been able to we do not have any mechanisms to enforce this, unfortunately. But so that's why I'm indicating that putting this in here may or may not help. I would like to get a legal opinion on that before we can have someone take a look at it and give us an opinion on it. But I don't, land use is how you prohibit these things from occurring. Yes, this is unfortunate that we inherited this situation, but going back after the fact is very, very difficult to do without proper legislative authority to do so.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. So what I'm hearing is that we can't address the facility issue through our animal control bylaw, but there is a possibility to prevent another building being put in our township through zoning. Is it possible to address this through a new noise bylaw if we incorporate something that addresses dog barking like what we heard here tonight? Because what I'd like to see, and if I need to, I'll make a motion, is to recommend that we make a commitment to pursue through our planning department zoning to address that type of facility, and also to revisit our noise bylaw to include something in there that captures that type of noise.
That in fact is the proper mechanism to do. And I mean, we know the noise bylaw is deficient in many ways for a growing community. And we are looking at it. Unfortunately, it is a county-wide issue. It's a county-wide bylaw, so we need buy-in from all the municipalities. So it's a bit of a slow process. But if council did want to direct staff to during the comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw to look at this, that would be the appropriate place to do it.
Just as a comment though, like if you read 2.2, no person shall permit a dog to make noise by barking, howling, or whining. Doesn't have any exceptions there. So dogs are dogs, dogs make noise. If we want to enforce this bylaw, we have to enforce dogs who are making noise. Right, well, we've already identified what noise is in this bylaw, so to me, no change has to happen in this bylaw. We've already said, with no exceptions, we are going to be enforcing no person shall permit a dog to make noise by barking, howling, or whining.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I think it still does, the noise and the dog barking needs to still be in this animal bylaw. And it just needs to be reinforced with the noise bylaw, and so that there's a consistent match between them both. And so in the meantime, I'm still wondering about there was a lot of comments made about the duration of the barking and, you know, the frequency and that, I think it's better to have some sort of guidelines about that, because to just sort of say they're barking, you know, in the country they do bark because they're guarding their territory.
To make it enforceable. We've been given that advice.
So Carrie is just saying how we could log the number of complaints related to noise. Is that some way? Because we do define it here as noise means a sound that at the point of reception is likely to disturb the inhabitants.
Yes, that's the definition as accepted by the court system. We've received advice on this. And their advice continued to tell us was that if council wishes, we could develop a policy, so it may involve the complainants to develop a noise log. So in the instance of the dogs barking for 20 minutes at 1 o'clock, 20 minutes at 2 o'clock, that would be noise likely to more likely to be held up in court other than excessive barking, because it's not excessive. It happens and it stops, and then it happens and it stops. So creating a policy and a noise log that we could send to residents to say, fill this out so we can enforce our bylaw.
It's used as evidence.
And it's used as evidence in the court. The other thing they mentioned was that if there's one resident complaining, maybe it needs to be 2 or 3, so that it's not really a neighbor war.
So could we provide direction to draft up that policy and then bring it back, and that's what sits underneath this?
You can just explore further.
Yeah, we could explore it further into what would be the appropriate way. That would be one of the ways that we were explained, but I think the direction would be for staff to explore the noise enforcement policy.
Okay. Can we provide direction for staff to explore creating a noise enforcement policy that fits underneath what the definition is? Okay. Okay, is that good? Is that good? Are we good with that? Before we move on anything else, are we good with that? Okay. Are you good with that? Is this something else, or is that? Okay. Councilor McRae.
I'd also like to instruct staff to also review this when they're looking at the noise bylaw, and also to review this with the zoning as well, because I really like to capture this, that we can give hope to the people that live in that area.
Okay, and that ties back with what Councilor Kitcher was talking about, make sure the 3 things now line up. Okay. Good? You good with that? Okay. Anything else that we had? We got the exotics, we got first line. Oops, sorry. Councilor Van Leeuwen.
Good. I have one question though on that no persons shall permit a dog to make a noise by barking, howling, or whining. I wonder if what they're trying to capture though is that a facility falls outside of that realm. So it's, we may say when they go back to court or whatever, is there value in saying no person, business, or facility? Because a facility is not a person and neither is a business. So it just captures that essence. And I wonder if that's why they keep coming back saying it's a facility, it's not a person, so it falls into different. How do you deal with it?
So if you look at the definition of person, it includes an individual, sole proprietor, partnership, limited partnership, trust, corporation, individual in his or her capacity as a trustee, executive, administrator, or legal representative. So we've covered everybody.
Would that include research facility? I missed
If
that.
it's a corporation, if it's a trust, if it's a.
Then I'm happy with that.
So
Okay,
person means person. based on that definition. So I think we're covered. Anything else? Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Kelly. I have a couple of concerns about clause 4.3b, and I wondered if I could ask Dr. Worden, could you come forward and could I ask you a question? No?
No, no,
Okay.
it's this council direction.
Okay.
Anything else? We're gonna change
The
that.
vaccination, we already said we.
Yeah, we're gonna look
It's
into
not
that
permitted
already.
procedurally?
No,
Okay.
no, but we are looking at that clause though already. Anything else? No, okay, you had your.
He's got his adjourn.
Oh, yeah, your motion adjourns. So before we get Councillor Kittredge to do a motion to adjourn, wanted to thank staff for all the work put into this. I know that it was a lot of work. I know it's not fun doing these sorts of bylaws because there's a lot of different thoughts on this. And as I said before, municipalities struggle with this. It's not about there's one right answer. There's lots of ways that we can do this. And one of the delegations talked about moving from a small town to a larger municipality that's more urbanized. We have to move ahead and do something here, so appreciate you guys putting this out there. It's a lot easier to take pot shots at something that's there versus just having a overall discussion. So appreciate the time that you put into this and the effort, and appreciate the discussion, appreciate all the delegations. This is something we want to make sure we get right, or as right as possible. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Kittredge, second by Councillor Van Leeuwen, all in favor? And we're adjourned.